Here we are. This is Red, White, and Bleed Blue.
Bleed Blue.
Take one. All right, here we are. We're with my good buddy Nick Putnam. He's behind the scenes. Buddy Duck. He's the man behind all the, all the background shit. I got no idea what's going on with any of that. And here we are.
You're not gonna introduce me, bro?
That's what your job is.
Alright, word. Alright. I'm Cobb, Doe Giants.
All right, so the Giants had a great season this year. I mean, I don't think anybody could have envisioned what could have happened this year. I mean, you look into the season with one of the worst rosters in the NFL, and I mean, I'm a diehard Giants fan. I thought that the Giants were going to suck for maybe 3 or 4 more years at least. I thought that there was nothing that we could do here. But Brian Dable came in. Joe Shane and Brian Dable was, 2 huge acquisitions to this franchise. And I mean, I could not thank them anymore for what they've done. And, he completely turned this team around. We won 4 games last year. Danny unfortunately got concussed in the beginning of the year. We couldn't really see a full season of Daniel Jones.
Well, to sum that up, I would say we've exceeded expectations. If you looked at a lot of websites, we were projected to win 4, maybe 5 games. And to come out, get into the playoffs, win a game, play against the Eagles, didn't end well for us, but what could you ask? To play against an NFC rival in the playoffs, it didn't go as planned, but I think we're going to be set for the future. We have the 3rd most cap room in the NFL this year.
$52.3 million.
And we're going to be able to build off that. Brian Dable did a great job with the roster we had, as Dawson said. We didn't have one of the best rosters in the NFL, bottom tier roster, but with Wink Martindale, Brian Dable, they were able to build a culture where guys were able to exceed in the roles they were put in, and we got the fruits of the labor. We couldn't have asked more for what they have added to our team and what the guys have been put in to play have done. They've done what they've been told to do, and they did great at it. It was a tough night on Saturday night, but
I think everybody could have foresaw that happening. I mean, the Eagles are very talented. I mean, they have the best offense in the NFL. They have Nick Sirianni, who did a great job with them for the last 3 years. I think he's been employed there, and it's just we were overmatched. Like physically, mentally, the whole 9 yards of that, you know what I mean? And it's just the fact that the Giants need to address they need to address some very key things going into the season.
I would say we had great, not just play calling, but time management all year. And I know we were trying to be aggressive in a playoff game, but on our first drive, when we were at the 40-yard line and decided to go for a play, the Eagles at the end of the game, they took a penalty. I know they're up. It's a different situation, but they take a penalty to go back 5 yards and punt. I think that could have changed the game if the Giants did that and pinned them back in their own red zone.
Yeah, well, I can understand why Brian Dable made that decision. I mean, right at the gate, the Eagles received the ball, and they scored within a minute. They scored within the first 2 minutes of the game. And it seemed like they had all the momentum in the world from the first snap that they had the ball. And I could get, the whole scenario, what's going on here, they're the 1 seed, they, home field advantage and all that. It's just, that was huge for them. I mean, the whole Philadelphia, mantra is just insane down
and
there.
And playing in their stadium as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's a crazy thing. But, not even that, it's just the fact that the Giants didn't have the talent to match up with them at all. It just, the Giants haven't had anything really exciting. Even though the Giants won 10 games this year, they were 10-8 to end the season. This was one of the most boring years of football I've ever had to watch, strictly because the Giants had no talent offensively catching the football. And that's probably the biggest thing that they need to address going into the season is finding somebody who can catch the ball and just someone who's dynamic with the football in their hands.
Well, now that you brought that up, so we got Saquon, who led the team with 76 targets. Darius Slayton had 71. Richie James was 70. If your running back is getting the most targets on your team, that means you don't have a lot of talent,
Yeah.
or you don't have the
And
system.
Darius Slayton didn't start getting meaningful snaps in the season until about week 5.
And he was banged up in the beginning, and that's back when we had Wandale Robinson, who got hurt, who I think is going to help us a lot next year in the slot. I want to say he had like 20, 30 something targets, only like 15 catches, but he had limited playing time in the beginning because he was hurt as well last year. But I would say Isaiah Hodgins is a guy that we need to keep on our team. We signed him off the practice squad. He had 42 targets, 33 receptions, had a couple touchdowns, and he was huge for us late in the season. He was able to take care of the football. I don't think he had a fumble. And he was Danny Dimes was looking for him a lot, and
he was really the only receiver that Daniel Jones had any sort of chemistry with whatsoever the last 8 weeks of the season, and he was signed in week 9. I don't even know how this guy wasn't even on a Buffalo roster for some reason, because I think he's a better receiver than Khalil Shakir, who's their wide receiver 3 right now, and I don't know. I feel like the Giants really got to jam.
Shakir did have a couple nice catches last week, even though they lost. But Richie James, he had a couple blunders in the beginning of the season on punt/kickoff returns, and then he got taken out for a little bit. But when he was in, he was productive. I don't think he's a real wide receiver too. With the money we have in the offseason, I would look to sign someone who's almost a wide receiver 1, because we don't even have a wide receiver 1. Kenny Galladay is getting paid a boatload of money, and he's not doing shit.
I think the moral of the story with that is that the Giants just did not have the talent in the receiver room. I mean, Richie James was a practice squad, and the guy who we signed for $72 million under Dave Gettleman, obviously, but Kenny Galladay had 4 catches this year through 17 games and had 9 catches last year.
He showed a little bit at the end of the season where he was getting a little feisty, but I don't know if that's him.
That was a completely meaningless game, though. You know what I mean? A lot of Giants fans would like to say that we had a chance in that last game and that it meant something, that our third stringers could match up with their starters, but that's not true at all. You know what I mean? It's just the Giants just do not have the talent flat out to compete with, even the Cowboys in that division either. You know what I mean? It's just they need to address a lot.
I think that accounts to the pressure that the Cowboys are able to get on quarterbacks, and our lack of pressure, like you said earlier in the season, the first 8-9 games, we had the least pressure on quarterbacks.
Well, we also led the league, and we blitzed the quarterback 44% of the time too. You know what I mean? And we put the most pressure on the quarterback in the NFL, and we were still in the bottom half in the league in sacks.
Yeah, so I think they kind of wants to bring you into your linebackers situation on new signings that we should get, because we had some linebackers who were more productive than people thought they would be, but there's some guys in the offseason that we could look at, because I think your statistic was we were 20-something.
We were 20th overall in the league against tight ends after the catch. They averaged 10.7 yards an attempt against our linebackers.
Which is unacceptable, but you can see what happens when you blitz a lot of guys and that middle's wide open, or may it be to the outside where we don't have linebackers there, and guys get open and tight ends hurt us a lot.
I think that the Giants can definitely address the linebacker situation during free agency too. There are 2 main guys that I want to talk about that are, 1, still fairly young, and 2, still fairly cheap to be able to sign. And the first one is David Long. He's a middle linebacker for the Tennessee Titans. So the Tennessee Titans this year were first in the NFL in rushing yards per game at 76.6, and he was the backbone of the defense in the middle of the field. He was flying all over the field, and this guy's an athletic freak, mind you. This guy ran a 4.45 on the 40-yard dash, and he has a 40-inch vertical, 39.5, but we'll round it up to 40. Which, begs you the question. You see the Giants' blunders in the last, 3 or 4 games mostly. which was defending the tight end. And so T.J. Hockenson had 2 huge games against us, and one in the playoff win that we, beat the Vikings, which was, I mean, just horrible. It shouldn't have even been that close to begin with. I mean, one reason was because T.J. Hockenson had 123 receiving yards in the first game and had 2 touchdowns, and in the second game had basically similar stats. And that was with Justin Jefferson only having 47 yards in the game, and they only had Dalvin Cook had 43 rushing yards.
I would also attribute that to the play style of Wink Martindale wanting to stop the number one threat on the other team, which against the Vikings would be Justin Jefferson. And that's where other guys can kind of find those holes in the defense where the defense is trying to primarily stop one guy. And T.J. Hockenson, he's able to find those holes.
I agree. No, I mean, that's why I think a guy like David Long, because since Jalen Smith was, just a big, burly 1960s linebacker, you know what I mean? He looked like Dick Butkus,
Yeah, can't keep up with the line.
He can't keep up with any,
like
Isaiah Likely did the same thing against us when we played the Ravens. Mark Andrews, we were just killed by tight ends all year, no matter if it was the offense, the other offense's main point, which was, that's what the Vikings wanted to do in the playoff game, which was they needed to go to Hockenson because Jefferson was completely locked down. We game planned for Jefferson to not catch the ball.
Cheers, Giants fans.
All right, so the main thing I want to address is the Giants linebacking core. So that was made by Jalen Smith and Micah McFadden and Tay Crowder for a short period of time. And so it was one of the weakest units in the NFL. It was very one-dimensional, it seemed. I mean, they could, particularly kind of stop the run, but it wasn't anything too impressive by any means. The Giants were still 23rd in the league in rushing yards per game. So we need, at least some sort of athlete, in the middle of the field. And that's what I think David Long is. So David Long is a guy, he was the middle linebacker of the Tennessee Titans for the last 3 or 4 years or so. And he was basically the backbone of a defense that's now become the best rushing defense in the NFL. This year they were first in the NFL in rushing yards per game. They were first in the NFL in rushing yards per attempt. So, he completely changed, and this was a guy that got drafted in the 6th round. He was 188th overall picked out of West Virginia, by the way. Go Mountaineers.
Shout out.
Little shout out Mountaineers there.
Actually fucked up VU. Let's go Pitt.
No, get out of here. But anyway, so he played 13 games last year. He got shut down the last 4 games of the year because of a hamstring. But so he was on 9 of the 13 games that he played last year. He played at least 94% of the snaps on the field. So that's just a guy that's just always on the field that doesn't need to come off. And that was the problem with the Giants last year. They kind of had a rotating set of linebackers. They didn't really have anybody that you could trust to just go out there, first down through third down to, just help you defensively. And they never had a guy that they could just keep there. But this guy potentially could, because he flies all around the field. He had 85 tackles in only 12 games. He's an athletic freak. He ran a 4.45 at his combine, and he jumped 39.5 inches in his vertical test. So I think he'd be a perfect matchup for modern tight ends, which I think is one of the weakest things. If you wanted to attack the Giants, which we saw this year, we saw the Vikings do it twice. We saw the Ravens do it. We saw the Eagles do it. We saw the Cowboys do it all this year, and they exploited us with tight ends the entire year. No matter if it was their first initial play call or if it was their, security blanket backup, they always could do it. As easily as they wanted to, without failure. And so we needed a guy, I think, to just be able to match up and just catch up with the modern tight end now. You look at the guys like Dawson Knox. You look at the guys like Dalton Schultz. You look at the guys like Isaiah Likely. You look at the guys like, Travis Kelce is the most important one of all.
I don't know how you didn't go to those guys first.
I don't know. Well, I'm thinking of the athletes that the Giants played this year. Like Isaiah Likely, got drafted in the 3rd round by Coastal Carolina this year. He's fast. He's a small little guy. He's a receiver, basically. Playing
he's like
tight end.
6'4", 6'5", though. He's got some size.
Yeah, but he's only like
can block.
He's only like 215 though. He's not very big. He's not like an old school Tony Gonzalez, size tight end.
But as you said, you need guys that can keep up with them. If we don't have guys that can keep up with them, they're going to free roam against the defense, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
As we showed this year in terms of guarding against tight ends.
And so he's also a great coverage guy too. So in the 13 games that he played, he had 5 passes defended. So let's look at some guys that played 17 games this season. You look at guys like Foye Olakun, who's a middle linebacker for the Falcons, had a really good year.
He used to be on the Giants, I believe. No, not him.
I don't think so.
What's his name?
I think Foye Olakun.
No, I don't think he did. No.
Spell that for me.
Foyesad.
I got you.
Oh, yeah, you got him.
No.
Yeah, he didn't play for the Giants.
No.
I think that might have just been me.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, it was just me playing Madden. I had him on one of my Giants teams.
So this guy played 17 games, had the same amount of passes defended. He played 4 less games and had 5 and 13. So that says something. And the same thing with everybody on this list. Bobby Okereke, he's the middle linebacker for the Colts, had a really good year, had 120 plus tackles this year. Jordan Brooks for the Bills had 5. Levante David had 5. So, these are guys and Levante David's another guy in free agency I wouldn't necessarily want, but the Giants could potentially look into him, maybe signing for a rental contract. I agree
with the rental contract point of view.
He's
an older guy.
He's 28 years old now. You wouldn't be able to, commit to him.
Yeah, he's shown what he can do,
years.
but in terms of our needs with guys that can keep up with tight ends that are quick and athletic, he's shown he can do that, but you just worry about him wearing down with his age and his ability to keep up with them. He has shown I feel like he's more of a pass rusher, but he can stay in pass coverage and keep up with guys, but you just worry how long the Giants would sign him to a contract if they were to. I would say maybe 1 to 2 years.
Maybe
see how it
2
goes.
years, maybe I think it would be at most.
Yeah, 3 years. If he's 31 years old, it's going to be tough for him to keep up with the tight ends if that's what we're signing him to do.
Well, the game just gets faster and faster as it progresses too. So
Every
the game,
season.
even in 2 or 3 years, the game's going to progress to be much faster than what he'd be able to offer us, and I think. But there's another guy, Tremaine Edmonds. He's the Bills' middle linebacker. He's also, that same kind of build. He's a little undersized, but he's flies around the whole field. And he's like I said before, he was fifth most passes defended among linebackers in only 13 games played this year.
Something we need for surely.
That's the biggest thing for this Giants defense to progress is to find just a basis in the middle to control the whole defense.
And I would say on both sides as well. Our offensive line, we played all right this year, but if you're talking about the middle, it's not just about the line, I would say. You got to get guys open in the middle of the field. You got to get guys open deep.
I agree.
And our receivers have just not. We haven't had any.
Brian Dable is, I think you look at, a franchise you can similarize this with is the Cincinnati Bengals right now. And the Cincinnati Bengals made the Super Bowl with one of the worst offensive lines that I've ever seen. Like, Joe Burrow got sacked 7 times in the NFC Championship last year and was just brutalized all season. He got sacked over 50 times. And if you can bring a team to the Super Bowl with that bad of an offensive line, I think more teams, including the Giants now, are going to take that risk of game planning around a bad offensive line.
But it's different. I love Danny Dimes, love what he's done for us, and I am full-heartedly want the Giants to sign him and re-sign him for the future. But he's not a Joe Burrow where he can just sit back in the pocket all the time. Yeah, under Brian Dable, he's had a great year. But Brian Dable with Josh Allen has shown that he can develop quarterbacks. And I hope in this second year with Danny Dimes, if we do decide to re-sign him, that he'll be able to get a step up, not just in the way he's been able to run the ball, which has been fantastic. He had, I believe, 7 rushing touchdowns this year and around 700 rushing yards.
703 to be exact. Yeah.
703 rushing yards. That's Vanilla Vic for you right there. He's going to keep it up. We know he has the legs for it. But if we can get some receivers and what Wink Martindale and Brian Dable has done, they've adjusted the system to the guys they have. If we can fill in some new receivers next year, I think Danny Dimes can take that next level in terms of throwing the football, finding guys open. It will increase his TD level. It could expand the defense for him to get some more rushing opportunities. Because with our team, we haven't really addressed Saquon yet, but
that's
he's
something
our
we're
guy.
going to have to do in the offseason, yeah. So the first thing that's on the mind of a lot of Giants fans going into the season is what are we going to do at the receiver position? Well, if the Giants want to do anything for the next maybe 3 or 4 years, if they wanted to compete now, they need to address the wide receiver position. And so what they could do, there are 2 different options. They could either find an established name in free agency, like, DJ Moore is a guy that I like out of Carolina, who's just had a carousel of quarterbacks throughout his whole time being drafted, going from Sam Darnold, PJ Walker, Baker Mayfield, and he's never been able to, and this is why I think I want to keep Daniel Jones too, is because he's not able to make any connections, Daniel Jones hasn't had a receiver his entire tenure with the New York Giants that he's been able to build a connection with, other than maybe Darius Slayton. And Darius Slayton isn't an everyday guy in the lineup, and he hasn't been for 2 years.
Darius Slayton, in my eyes, is more of a deep threat. Yeah, he can help us in the short game, but one of his best abilities is to get long.
He's not a guy that you trust to go out there on every single down and make a play at any level of the field.
And I think DJ Moore can be that guy, especially with the quarterbacks he's had. He's proved that he can still go out there every day, play, pick you up yards. Yeah, he might not have gotten a bunch of targets with the quarterbacks he's had, but some years he's had.
Yeah.
In the beginning of his career, he was putting up, I think one year he had 90-something targets. And a guy like that could be very useful for our offense. He's shown he can get to the end zone, and he just racks up yards, which is great for our offense because I think in the red zone, the way Danny Dimes has been able to take care of the football this year, and with Saquon, as long as we get to the red zone, we can put up points.
Yeah.
And that's all that matters.
And that's what Kenny Galladay was supposed to do for us at the receiver position. He was supposed to be that red zone threat that, he once was. He led the league in touchdown receptions in 2019.
And we're paying him a shitload of money.
I was ecstatic to find out that the New York Giants signed Kenny Galladay. I thought that they could have been back. But then the 2 years afterwards proved obviously false. Spill a little bit of beer there.
Spill a little bit of beer. Shout out Busch Light. Give us a sponsor. Shout out Koozie Sports.
Should bring back Busch Apple though.
Yeah, that's a fact.
So another guy like that is Jerry Jeudy. So you look at, Broncos country, let's ride. You did not let Russell Wilson cook this year, unfortunately. But it's another just dumpster fire they have going on over there, and they don't have an established wide receiver one. They have 2 possible wide receiver ones. You got Cortland Sutton and you have Jerry Jeudy. Those are 2 guys who haven't been able to separate themselves from each other. And I think maybe the best executive decision for both of them is to probably split up and one of them go to New York.
I would almost
Jerry
prefer...
Jeudy would be the guy that would be, I think he'd thrive in a system, where he becomes the true wide receiver one. And I think Brian Dable would do great things with him. You look at so going back to his tenure with the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen was given Stephon Diggs, who has completely changed their entire culture around from being, the 18 previous years of not making the playoffs and then going to the conference championship once in 2019, and then becoming a perennial playoff team that's for the last 3 years has been a pretty big favorite to win the Super Bowl. So a wide receiver one like that can completely just change a franchise around. And maybe I think a guy like Judy just isn't in the right spot right now.
I think we could try and address that in the draft, but I would love us, with the cap room we have, first, keep our guys.
Yeah.
First, I would say 1 and 2 would be Saquon and Danny Dimes interchangeably, but I would love to have both of them together.
Daniel Jones is the most important signing you need to make this year. I think that you need to get him on a team-friendly 3-year extension, maybe worth a total of about $65 million.
But if we don't re-sign Saquon, that means we have to go into free agency with a running back, and he's as good as they come. He proved it this year. He's been banged up the last couple of years, but his physical attributes are just hard to stop, and he showed it this year. His vision, his quickness, his elusiveness, his ability to break tackles, and his ability to catch the ball led our team in targets this past year with 71.
As a running back.
Which goes back to our point before, which we need wide receivers bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the number one need that we have. I think that if we don't do something in free agency, we have the draft capital to maybe go up and get a guy like Quentin Johnson out of TCU. He had a monster year for the Horned Frogs and, ultimately led him and Max Duggan to the national championship, which, I mean, obviously they got walloped, but he proved that he's a huge talent. He's huge.
And him, if he could pair up with Wan'Dale Robinson, who was great when he was in the game, but for not playing all that much, he showed what he can do. But having some more young guys on our roster, especially at the wide receiver position, and then paying big money to another receiver in free agency, I think it'd help us a lot because we have a lot of practice squad guys that have proved themselves. But let's see them prove it in the offseason if they're going up against other guys fighting for a position on that roster.
All right, but aside from Quentin Johnson, who's probably the consensus number one wide receiver coming into the draft this year, there are two guys that I think the Giants could potentially just stay at 26 and could maybe get. I'm not too sure, though. We'll see after, the combine and everything, what numbers these guys test out at. But as of right now, I think that the Giants could stay and just potentially draft a guy like Jackson Smith-Njigba, who didn't play a single down of football this year, aside from the first game when he got hurt on his first catch this year.
I think he's still a high-level recruit where guys will look to get him high. I think 26 might be a little late to get him. They could move up to maybe the 19 or 18 spot.
It's gonna depend on his draft. It's gonna depend on his combine. This guy hasn't been seen all year. He denied playing throughout the playoff. He denied playing throughout the whole season because of his hamstring, but that's not his fault. That's not what I'm saying.
But he's shown what he can do when he's on the field already.
Yeah, I mean the only reason why I'm so in love with Jackson Smith-Njigba is because going back to the 2021 Rose Bowl game against Utah, I don't know if you watched it, but Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson they opted out of the game. It was a BY 6 game, New York 6 game, one of the 6 biggest bowls. It was a 6 versus 7 matchup. And so everybody thought that, Olave and Garrett Wilson were these two stud receivers, and that them not playing was going to ensure that they were going to lose completely. And then that was the first time I ever saw Jackson Smith-Njigba play, and he had 14 receptions for 321 yards and 3 touchdowns against Utah in the Rose Bowl in the first game he started ever.
Utah, I wouldn't say is a great team, but he's still shown what he has done on the college football field, yeah, sitting out for a year is going to be very difficult. But like you said, he can show what he can do in the combine, and I really hope he goes. I don't think he would opt out of the combine like other guys have done in the past because he's been sitting out for a year. But he could, like the Giant, if he stayed in that 26 to 32 range this year, yeah, but I don't think he's gonna go past 18.
I think that the Giants, if they wanted to take the chance, I think that they could. I think that they have the draft capital. They have 4 picks in the top 100. They have the 53rd overall pick in the second round, which I mean I don't know if Joe Schoen's going to want to use that just yet, but they have 2 third-round picks because of Kadarius Toney, who we traded earlier in the season.
I hate that. That pissed me off. I love Kadarius Toney.
No,
Shout out.
I'm very glad the New York
out.
Giants got rid of Kadarius Toney. I really am.
Let's go, you. And I'll shout out Florida. Sorry, he didn't go to the U. Fucked up.
No.
You can edit that out, but.
No, keep keeping that one in.
Shout out Florida.
But I think the Giants.
Shout out Kodak.
The Giants have a lot of capital. If they wanted to get a receiver in this draft out of the top 4, I think that Joe Schoen can make it happen. I think he really could find just anybody to fix what's happening with the Giants right now offensively. I think he very well could.
It's just, I think the primary aspect that we need to go for is the skill positions.
Yeah.
Because we showed that we didn't have a lot of depth. Well, we showed that we did have depth because we had guys that we could go to, but we didn't have that star, which
Definitely not.
any Super Bowl team, they need a star on their team. Saquon is a star, but the way that football is played now, you're looking for a guy that you can throw it too deep, looking for a guy that you can give 10, 15 targets to a game, who's going to give you 100-plus yards, and we don't have that guy. That's why we need a receiver who can be solid, because our defense has been carrying us throughout this season, and that I really think starts with Wink Martindale, who has changed our defense this season. We don't have a lot of big names. We have some guys who have come into their own throughout the season. They've played great given the role they've been in, but we have a lot of work to do in that position. But Wink Martindale has shown he can work with anyone, and if we get some high-skill players on defense, we can have a great season next year as well.
Wink Martindale was just a guy that, had to work with what he had, With all the injuries to basically every single level of the defense, whether it was the corners, Adoree Jackson was out for 3 or 4 weeks this year, and had guys like Rodarius Williams starting CB1 playing against top echelon receivers like CeeDee Lamb. And it's unfair to a defensive coordinator to have to guard, these first round elite level receivers with practice squad players. But he just somehow made it happen and made the Giants defense one of the best in the NFL.
And I think that showed how great he is as a defensive coordinator, and it shows that we need him. He's an integral part of our team. He is able to get guys in their positions to where they can know what they're supposed to do. They know their role. And it's helped us a lot this season where we blitzed, you said 44% of the snaps?
Yeah, it was the highest in the NFL. 44.6% of snaps.
And he knew he is a blitz-heavy coordinator, but that's what he needed to do with our defense because we don't have a lot of guys who can guard a number 1 wide receiver like Justin Jefferson, which there aren't a lot of guys in the league that can do that. But if we can spend our money in the right ways, find guys who can fit on the defense, work in Wink Martindale's program, if we do decide to keep him, because we should pay him a lot of money. Wink Martindale was...
I think that should be a top priority is to keep Wink Martindale this year, especially over Mike Kafka, too. Mike Kafka and Martindale both are currently being interviewed for multiple head coaching jobs in the NFL. And I could definitely live without having Mike Kafka here. I think that Brian Dable could find his replacement very easily. I don't think that's a pressing need. But defensively, the Giants seem to have found their identity. With just being able to bound together in times of uncertainty, especially during this year, with all the injuries that they had to deal with. Guys getting called off the practice squad and getting thrown on planes to go play in New York a week after. All right, that's it for episode 1. This is Red, White, and Bleed Blue. Very raw first take, but we're going to build up from this. And I just want to give thanks to Nick and Duck behind the scenes here. We're going to build off this, This is obviously just a very raw, unprepared set that we had here, but I'm looking to build off it. I'm looking to really, really make something serious out of this. And, Koozie country in general.
We're just going to pretend that I just magically became Cobb. All right, so this is the first and probably the last time you'll see me on here. Just coming on here real quick to say that there's this going to be the first of very many different podcasts. I know there's Yankees coming up for all you Giants fans who are probably Yankees fans. I know there's Mets as well, which you'll probably see Cobb and Kyle from previous videos. There's Bulls basketball, UConn coming up, college basketball, you name it, it's probably coming up. I think that's about all I've got to say. Leave a like, subscribe. I would say go Giants, but go Steelers.
So where were we at? You were talking about David Long.
Yeah.
I don't know shit about him.